Hi, I'm Eric with Bell Performance. Thank you for joining me for this edition of the Bell video blog. Today we're going to talk about White Castle. Specifically, we're going to talk about an op-ed piece that their CEO Lisa Ingram published in a Kentucky newspaper earlier in 2014, specifically about some hard facts about how ethanol fuels and the renewable fuels mandate are impacting businesses like White Castle. Now, most people think that McDonald's invented the fast food industry, but really, if you look back through history, White Castle has probably as much, if not more, of an influential place in the history of the development of the fast food and the restaurant industry in the United States. White Castle was started by a couple of brothers in two gentlemen in 1921, one of which was current CEO Lisa Ingram's grandfather or great-grandfather, one of the two. 1921, 15 years after Upton Sinclair published the influential book The Jungle, so 1906, and The Jungle really turned a lot of Americans off to the consumption of ground beef because it basically exposed how the food industry and the meat industry in the United States in that first decade of the 20th century was really a disgusting mess. So ground beef consumption was way down. People weren't eating it because they were scared. So the creators of White Castle knew that in order for them to succeed in this new restaurant, which was going to be serving hamburgers, they were going to have to fight against that perception. So they specifically designed their stores, the image of the white, spotless, clean surfaces, employees dressed in spotless white uniforms. They were responsible for implementing a lot of what's pretty much standard practice nowadays with things like the kitchen assembly line concept. They also invented the hamburger bun, of all things. So White Castle was a roaring success. The White Castle slider was considered by many people to be the most influential food piece in American history. So Lisa Ingram gets a chance to write an op-ed in a Kentucky newspaper, and what she talks about is how the renewable fuels standard, specifically the ethanol standard, the ethanol mandate, is impacting White Castle's business. Some of the points that she raised, the pressure that the whole thing about ethanol has placed on the corn supply has caused corn prices to be up by 300%. And what that has done to their food costs is really significant. She says nationwide, each store pays an average of $15,000 more every year just in food costs. She cited, since she wrote it in a Kentucky newspaper, she talked about in Louisville, Kentucky, they have 29 stores. Those 29 stores together every year are paying $435,000 more just in food costs. Now remember, that's not a total food cost. That is how much more they're paying. And of course, one of the points she makes is what every good business owner is gonna raise when they're talking about higher costs, which is, she says, what could we do with $435,000? We could open more stores, we could hire a heck of a lot more people, yet we can't because all of our food costs are going up because of the ethanol mandate. She also raises a very interesting point that people who aren't business owners can forget a lot of times. She says that because of the pressure that the ethanol mandate has placed on food costs, it makes it almost impossible for them to plan properly. In order to run a business, you've got to be able to accurately predict what your costs are going to be at some point in the future. And because ethanol has placed such a pressure on food prices, it's made it really difficult for them to be able to predict how much they're going to have to spend at X point in the future on food, which is really an essential part of their business, obviously. And what that means for them as well is, if they can't predict what their food costs are going to be, they have to put aside more money just in case food goes up by more than they planned. So the renewable fuel standard and the ethanol mandate actually ends up costing them even more, not only because they have to pay more for food, but because they have to put aside more capital just in case these food costs go up by more than they might anticipate. She cites things like the average person, even people who don't go into White Castle and buy sliders, when you go to the grocery store, the cost of corn, the increased cost of corn rippling through the rest of the fuel supply is making the price of everything else go up. You talk about stuff like pork going in the grocery store 15% more expensive than it used to be. You talk about things like eggs are 10-11% more expensive. Beef is about 8 to 10% more expensive. Even something like potatoes, 10-15% more expensive, just because of the pressure on the food supply that the ethanol mandate is placing through the corn market. So, her point was, it's hurting businesses. White Castle is just one business, just one fast food chain across the country. If it's hurting White Castle that much, her point is, what kind of damage is it doing to business overall? And so her point is, the ethanol mandate does not seem to be working, and of course she as a business owner advocates a change or even a repeal of that. So we think it's pretty interesting to hear a business owner who is on the front lines making a commodity that the majority of Americans use at any given time, fast food, give some specific information on how the ethanol mandate is impacting their business directly and therefore impacting consumers directly. So thanks for joining me today. If you like this, you can read about it on the Bell blog, found at bellperformance.com. You can also go to wefixfuel.com, another great educational website, lots of great resources for you to read or share with your friends. So thanks for joining me. I'm Eric with Bell Performance. See you next time. Bye-bye.